Welcome back to Backseat Gaming. I wanted to take advantage and talk about Christmas time, given that it's the season. We're out here on top of the car, just staring at the sky like Homer Simpson at the ending of that episode where his mom visits him. I think a lot of people out there, if you were blessed enough to have it, you kind of got most of the video game pickups around the holidays. So it was more so like you got maybe one or two games or stuff like that throughout the year. But once we finally hit Christmas time was when the bigger game was like purchased or the console was purchased. And so I just really wanted to share more or less some of my favorite memories and stuff involving that. Honestly, sometimes I feel like the best memories I really have from like gaming during Christmas time is just the idea of like staying up to go see Santa. So I don't know if this is like a Mexican household thing or if just pretty much everyone does this. I don't know. I knew some kids that wouldn't open their presents until the next day, but we would stay up until midnight. That way we could just go like, whoa, it's Christmas, and you get to open everything there and then. I was a big fan of like Lego sets and stuff like that. So sometimes even if it was like small enough, I was like so excited that I'd start building them there and then. But sometimes I would wait till the next day. But a big thing that we would do is that we would usually game on like the stuff we already had, and then that would be our thing that we all stayed up doing to try to stay up. Which, like looking on it now, I think explains my love for games like Jackbox Party, where it's like the most convenient, just futuristic or whatever form of like multiplayer games. There's a lost art form. I've noticed that I own a couple of games that are co-op, but they tend to be kind of more so like multiplayer, not so much co-op. They're like versus shooters and things like that, which is cool, and that's really fun and it is a vibe. But there's something about being able to play a game with like two people that was so just fantastic. I'm thinking more of experiences like, I guess, Battle Block Theater would be a more modern example of that. But even as a kid, there was examples of like, there's Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, where if you guys are all hooked up to the link cables, you can explore literally the entire world. So it has this like Metroidvania design to it, Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, where you have like the home hub and you can just kind of enter worlds either through the main hub once you figure out how to enter, or you can stumble across them in other levels. But it ends up all interconnected at one point. If you play through it by yourself, it's a little bit sad. But if you have friends, it's actually a lot more exciting because you get to see everything going on, like, I guess concurrently is the word I'm looking for. And then there's also experiences that aren't so much co-op, but they are still like, it's versus, but there's a different vibe to it. One thing that I very much miss, I don't think we get with gaming now, because now, like everything, they kind of just want to charge you for like every little piece, every little bit. But back in the day, a good example of what I'm talking about would be Mario Kart for the DS. Not only is it probably one of the better Mario Karts, in my opinion, I think a lot of people talk about it pretty positively, but if you didn't have your own copy of the game, the DS at the time would offer this fantastic thing called Download Play. So really all you needed was a single copy of the actual game, and then you could play a type of version of it with your friends as long as they had their own DS, obviously. I think this applied to a couple of games. I think off the top of my head, I can only recall maybe like there's certain like Mario 64 mini games I think you can play doing that. And then I think like New Super Mario Brothers also had like its own like version of it. But you don't get like the full game, of course, like because there's no way, to download or send a copy of like the full game to someone else just based off of Wi-Fi. But in Mario Kart's example, you get access to, I think, all of the courses, truth be told. All of them, if not most of them. And I think you just don't get to pick, like, your character. I think the person that owns the copy of Mario Kart gets to, like, pick whoever they want, and everyone else is just some sort of variation of Shy Guy. When, you just need something that's really accessible, really quick, there's nothing better than just say, like, go get your copy of Mario Kart and let's just race for hours and pass away the time and get into all sorts of shenanigans, whether it's just racing normally or even just like the balloon battle. Yeah, you don't get to pick like your character. You don't get to pick I think all of the courses, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe some of them are unavailable, but you do get to like have fun with your friends or your cousins or whatever in a really easy way. And I think that ease of accessibility when it comes to co-op, when it comes to versus, it's kind of becoming a lost art form a little bit. Speaking of Christmas, do you remember the consoles that you got on Christmas Day? Because believe it or not, there's a few that come to mind. I remember for sure that I think like one of the handhelds that I had, I want to say the Game Boy SP was not a Christmas pickup, but I think honestly every other console or handheld I've had in my whole life has always been just like a Christmas present, which I mean, I guess I could kind of briefly go through them in order. I've said this in other videos, but I by default grew up with a Nintendo and a Super Nintendo because my dad owned both. Truth be told, I don't know if bro had them before I was born. I mean, I was born in '94, so I don't know when the Super Nintendo came out, maybe earlier than that, based on Sega don't what Genesis does. But in any case, that's what I grew up with is my point. So they were great consoles, and some of my favorite games of all time were on them, but they're definitely not something that was like, you don't get that experience as a kid, like, wow, like this is like my own console, you know? Yes, I know I didn't buy it with my own money. Obviously, my parents did. I'm very grateful for that. But there is something different, I guess, about, I mean, hand-me-down sounds kind of harsh, but when it's finally yours, it's like, whoa, like I've been thinking about this ever since I picked up my first game. And the first console I can think of for sure was absolutely the first PlayStation. And I think it was because I grew up basically crammed in an apartment with my dad and my mom and a few of his brothers and sisters. And so I had like just full-blown like cool uncle syndrome, you know, like a lot of my uncles would be always up to some shenanigans, cracking jokes. And naturally, my dad, he was always an old school like Mario guy because that's why I inherited his Nintendo and his Super Nintendo. But he had a brother, my uncle, who's actually, funnily enough, the person who was the godfather at my wedding, along with the one to my baptism, or my first communion, sorry. I might have gotten that wedding one, the term wrong, but the point being, he's a little bit on the younger side. So he actually grew up also liking games, because I think he just looked up to my dad a lot, so they had a lot of shared interests. But when he was like young, it was in the 90s, you know, and I was a little baby. So what he was growing up with was just straight up the Sony PlayStation. I don't know how much I can emphasize that, like, when 3D gaming was brand new, like, the amount of like push and marketing and like how much like, oh my God, this is going to revolutionize everything. Like, I can't be understated. Like, even when I was a teenager, like in middle school, like, which now would have only been like maybe what, I'm ancient, so let me do the math real quick. Like 15 years ago, let's say, or so, 15 to 20 years ago, you could still find like just retro video games, you know, like old school platformers and stuff like that, like 2D stuff, sealed even for a really cheap price. It took a really long time, I feel like, for that to kind of start becoming a more popular thing. It's important now, like the whole graphical thing, like the like, yes, let's keep updating how games look and make them more realistic or whatever. But back when I was a kid, this was especially true. So I think what I'm getting at here is that I remember the PlayStation really well because it was the first thing I opened up on Christmas. It came with a copy of Spyro the Dragon, and if I'm remembering right, I want to say either the first Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Might have gotten that one from my uncle though. But for sure, the one I booted up first was Spyro the Dragon. And I remember when my uncle had his PlayStation, he was more into like great games, don't get me wrong, but more so things like Legacy of Kain, you know, Soul Reaver, and like Twisted Metal, I think he had a copy of too, which is stuff that it was technically not appropriate for me. When I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons or the Power Rangers or even wrestling because violence. For whatever reason, I was definitely allowed to watch my uncle play rated T or M games. I think eventually, though, my mom figured out how the ESRB works, so that ended that pathway. But in any case, obviously being a kid, that stuff was like cool, but I feel like it wasn't really appealing to me because it wasn't really meant for me in a sense. So when I finally got to play Spyro the Dragon, this like a really fun, vibrant, colorful world where the music, because sound is something I've always paid a lot of attention to in games, was like so realistic, like not that like the retro, like I guess like synth sounds or whatever of a Nintendo are like bad. The compositions are great, but it's a really different experience from like a full orchestral score on a CD. It's like I can only describe it. It's like similar to like when you're in the shower and you plug in your ears and you hear the water like kind of pouring over all muffled and you kind of slightly open them up. That's like Nintendo and Super Nintendo. And the Sony PlayStation was like taking your finger off your ears completely. And the PlayStation I remember really well because my first game was Spyro, but because of my uncle, it was really easy to just keep trying different and youth experiences on it. Like the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo were awesome, but I really would only get games when I would go to Mexico, because when we would go to Mexico, there's all these like swap meets and stuff like that where, again, this is like way back then. So things like the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo was everyone's hand-me-downs back then, when I was a kid anyways. And it is doubly true in Mexico, because the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo was like, well, send your old console back to your cousins in Mexico so they could use it while you're here playing on your freaking Xbox 9. Plus trying to find, obviously, like video games, like old school stuff at like a big box retailer. When I was a kid, I mean, they're not gonna have a Link to the Past at Kmart. So Mexico it was, and we would typically only go maybe like once a year or something like that. So when we would go, cool, like new Nintendo game, new Super Nintendo game, but man, like we would only be able to pick up maybe like 2 or 3, and then we would head back here. And then at some point, even like put it this way, at some point I was the person that was like, go send your console to your cousins over there so they can use it. So at some point the Super Nintendo actually ended up staying over there, and that's where it was last seen. I've put up missing posters, and if you've seen this Super Nintendo, please call this number. But the PlayStation was like, because of my uncle, he had so many games for it. It was the first time I recall, like just back to back, like, cool, I get to try this. Cool, I get to try the Big Boy Legacy of Kain game. Cool, I get to try Tony Hawk, like my cool friends are into. Cool, I get to try like Ape Escape, And so I would say in terms of consoles and stuff like that, the Sony PlayStation was for sure like the most memorable Christmas pickup in terms of just like in terms of just like big consoles, which is crazy because at some point I also got a PlayStation 2, and I mean, there's a reason why it's the best-selling console of all time. So the Switch probably overtakes it soon. And I have some of my favorite gaming memories really on the PlayStation 2 also. But I think it wasn't. It wasn't impressive technically for sure, graphically from the original PlayStation to the PS2. But I think there was something so magical about like that initial hop from like, this is like the 2D pixel, two-dimensional gaming straight out to like this new world, this new concept of gaming that I hadn't imagined before. And just being able to experience it at Christmas time, with like all of my like siblings and a sibling back then, and my cousins and stuff like that, and you'd be able to gush over like how things look and analog sticks, like that was like, I had played, I think, in some arcades. We didn't really have too many of those, if I remember right, nearby, but just the idea of like analog sticks, analog controls on a home console was just interesting. It was different for sure. It wasn't the first time I played a PlayStation, I think. I would save that to like my cousins also had one in Mexico, because I had someone on my mom's side that was basically they lived in Mexico City, which is very like similar to how it is here. They're very like, I guess they keep up with culture or whatever. I don't know what the word I want to use for it is. But as a kid, staying up past midnight, staying up late into the night, like just straight out like sleepover status, was a pretty rare event for us, truth be told. I think it was mostly because like I would be like too sleepy and grouchy if I didn't get to bed early enough, because you got school and stuff like that the next day. Also, it was the weekends. That one was fine, but those were far and few in between. And for sure, like staying up to play the new PlayStation was one of those favorite Christmas memories of mine growing up. I want to say too, also, like in terms of handhelds being the next one, um, I would probably also give it, I think, to the DS Lite. So hear me out, because if I remember right, in terms of handhelds, I think the SP and the original DS, like the fat one, those are both not Christmas pickups. Because I honestly do remember getting the fat DS, because both me and my sister got them around the same time, and I remember having a very like core memory of the both of us. I don't know if we were like playing it separately or together, but we were playing New Super Mario Brothers on the car ride home, because it, I think, turned on, out of the box. But I think the DS Lite is one of my favorites, because that was one that comes back to me as like, we all finally had one. So we finally got to hop into, like how I said, Mario Kart earlier. But aside from that stuff, what made it very memorable was the DS was like kind of like the first thing that felt almost like a precursor to us like nowadays with smartphones, because the DS has Picto Chat and things like that. So I didn't mention it too much earlier when I was talking about Mario Kart, and it was honestly available since the very first DS. Like, this wasn't a DS Lite exclusive thing, but just being on Picto Chat, just sending each other nonsense and drawings and things like that. I'm really happy that Nintendo, at least they used to anyways, lean a lot into that kind of stuff, because it's a lot of fun. And just being able to like do something together, like on our DSs. If Mario Kart tells you anything, it's not like we all had multiple copies of the carts that we owned, right? Of the games that we owned. I mean, especially me. I'm a Pokemon kid, so like, it's not really a multiplayer game. Can't send that over DS download. So it's having something to do on your console or your handheld that isn't like a game. You know, there's something to be said about that I don't know if that still happens, because I don't own a Switch, but it's incredibly underrated. And I remember like straight out, especially the drawing function and stuff like that, like we would stay up quite a bit of time on one of the Christmases that we got that. I can't remember the exact one. After the PlayStation, for sure, obviously. Just sending each other like a bunch of like dumb things. And that pattern would still continue, honestly, because like even on the DSi, which was the next one that I got, they kind of went full blown like fun shenanigans with that one, because that's the one where you could take photos. I'll try to get some footage if I can, because I still have my DSi somewhere, and just like just nonsense, you know, like photo editing, really low quality, like 360p photos that, I mean, whenever you see like a fight on the internet, that's like, you know how the quality turns bad during those? That's basically like the level of quality that a DSi camera would take. You could record audio and listen to MP3s too. By the way, that was like a big one for me, sitting on like, I don't know, like the car ride home with my earbuds in, listening to the Bleach soundtrack. But yeah, it was like my main MP3 player. I think I had an iPod Nano before that, but it got stolen at school after everyone literally told me not to bring it to school. But being able to just load up my MP3s onto the SD card was awesome. And I was a real big fan of like just, I want to say it's called Flipnote Studio, if I remember right, where you could just like not only see a community of people animating and stuff like that, but you could also download their notes. And if I remember right, it would either let you just play them back, or it would let you see how people made them. But I would just like spend hours animating in Flipnote, and they had a function where you could send it to each other and stuff like that too. So it was almost like the evolved version of PictoChat. And it's handy for a kid, you know, like, no, not everyone wants to like freaking game like the entire time on these things. No, like the whole point of these handhelds was to get kids to socialize and have fun together. So having something that's not entirely focused on just that, it definitely made for a very memorable Christmas, that's for sure. So I've talked about my favorite console opening on Christmas, my favorite handheld opening on Christmas. Is there maybe another category? I'm thinking, what about games? What are your favorite games that you've opened up on Christmas? And yes, of course, let me know your favorite handheld openings and your favorite console openings too. But I did want to get into a favorite game on Christmas, which is actually a tough one. I did have to think about that for a little bit. But it's a pretty straightforward answer once I kind of like reached that conclusion, because it's the one that I think altered the brain chemistry that led me to like being interested in maybe game development when I was a kid. It definitely led me to learning how to draw. I can think of only one example that altered my brain chemistry in terms of games that I opened during Christmas time. And I gotta give that to the Sonic Mega Collection Plus. PlayStation 2, we've come back to Sony full stop. Me and my sister have an aunt. Well, yeah, she's my sibling. No, but the story is that I have an aunt that has a Dreamcast, and she lives in Georgia, which me and my sister, I think my younger brother wasn't quite around yet the first time that we went to Georgia. But her Dreamcast was like, I think the time I remember being the most mind blown over a console because, funnily enough, I think this was after I got my PlayStation 2. So it was like kind of last gen, but not really. But there's something about the aesthetic of the Dreamcast that's so like, it's unmatched even like with consoles today. Like there's nothing cooler than a Sega Dreamcast. And it's a real shame that they got they got freaking bodied out of the console race, because like there's a lot of good in the Sega Dreamcast even now. Like I think if I remember right, it has like a home brewing scene and even like things like that. But the point of the story is, we got to play things like Tomb Raider, and most importantly, together we got to play a lot of Sonic Adventure. So Sonic Adventure was like awesome story, some fantastic music. It's like some storytelling, which is something that was pretty new to me. I think around that time was like the idea of storytelling in games was like something I hadn't considered as important to me before that. And it was just a lot of fun, honestly, truth be told. And so we and my sister would play it so much that we could quote it. We remember specific moments of the game, and we were just like, whoa, like, I didn't know this was like, we had seen Sonic and stuff like that, like you see him, I don't know, like mascots, Mickey Mousing everywhere, but we had never played any of his games. So that was like our first real Sonic the Hedgehog experience. And it's funny, right? It wasn't the 2D games that did it. It was just Sonic Adventure. That was the first time I ever got to try it. And so I started, I think like Sonic X was airing on TV at the time. And I got into the comics, I think, a little bit. It might have been before, or it might have been after, Sonic Mega Collection Plus. But the point being is that playing Sonic Adventure, when I got my PlayStation 2, I think, I don't know if it was the same Christmas or a different Christmas, but a Christmas, basically, I got the Sonic Mega Collection, which was just a real simple port of all the classic Sonic games in a really simple package, really handy package that gave you stuff like cheats, save states, which were extra handy. That was my first experience with save states. But most importantly, it was my experience with the old school Sonic games, which really, like, I remember we stayed up quite a bit on Christmas Eve, day by that point, just playing the OG Sonic games. And I remember thinking it was so cool. The music was even better or just as good as Sonic Adventure. The graphics are fantastic. I spent hours in the extras menu just digging through concept art, comic covers. Like, I think they get unlocked as you play, but yeah, they would show you a lot of things like early versions of the Sonic Heroes trailer, which I wanted so bad, but I don't think I ever owned a copy as a kid. My cousins did though. And so I think it'd be like handing me a copy of Super Mario All-Stars with like a bunch of like concept art and like Miyamoto's like rarest interviews and stuff like that. So just having that collection, like, really, I think, pushed me towards the idea of being like a big Sonic fan and just getting into like a lot of his like fandoms and stuff like that. So like I started drawing a lot because of these games. I got interested in like little like game dev communities because Sonic fan games go pretty, they go pretty hard. I still even to this day. So I even remember like there's a specific fan mod, I don't know. By this point, it's its own thing really, of Doom called Sonic Robo Blast 2. I think I mentioned it in my last vid a little bit. And I remember downloading a Doom level editor and just trying to figure out how to make levels and stuff like that. And I made like these little crazy nonsensical hallways and like did my best to make them playable, but to no avail. And so I think Sonic Mega Collection, opening that on Christmas was incredibly magical. Because I mean, it's old school video games, it's old school Sonic. So Me and my siblings and cousins and everyone, we all had a blast playing it. You can't go wrong with old school Sonic. And I think it just set me on a very specific path with my taste and everything. So there's just something that like I'll always look back fondly on when it comes to like, I think the specific games I remember opening on Christmas. It's gonna easily be that one at the number one for sure. So yeah, more of a casual sit down type of video, but I think that's really just what I wanted to get into, because of the season. Just what were your favorite experiences in regards to gaming during Christmas time? Did you stay up late like I did? Is that considered, like a naughty thing? Does that get you in trouble with Santa? I don't know. But if you get a shot, let me know what your favorite game was that you've opened on Christmas, or heck, even if you remember your favorite console, your favorite handheld, I know for sure, I think I might've gotten one or two of those on a birthday or something instead. But more videos to come for sure. And I hope you're enjoying your holidays. I will try to take advantage, I think, of just like holiday season, I suppose, and upload as much as I can and just get some like maybe interesting discourses going on and stuff. But aside from that, I will catch you guys very soon. Happy holidays. Stay tuned for more Backseat Gaming.